One of probably the most unknown weapons within Russia's arsenal is probably the BMPT Terminator. This is a really unusual armored fighting vehicle which has really come to prominence in sort of the last few years with the war in Ukraine, but has in reality been in combat service with the Russian army since about 2011. So the design of the BMPT, which is often referred to as the BMPT Terminator, can actually be traced back as far as the Soviet-Afghan War. It was in this conflict where it was discovered that, well, things like the BMP-1 and BMP-2 had the elevation and a rapid-fire gun to be able to eliminate Mujahideen fighters upon the higher rock tops. Often their 30mm cannons just didn't have enough of a punch, and often they found themselves not able to effectively engage targets. Tanks could engage targets effectively, things like T-72s and T-80s, but they themselves didn't have the same level of elevation and thus couldn't hit Mujahideen fighters on high cliff tops. This problem was noted by Soviet designers. In particular, this was the Chelyabinsk tractor plant, who began working on three new prototypes for countering such enemy insurgents in the 1980s. They were basically given a series of requirements on what the army wanted. These were heavy firepower, high angles of elevation and depression, and protection that would have been equivalent to a main battle tank. This was mostly to protect against things like RPG attacks, which things like BMPs are highly susceptible to. Further evidence for this need was found in the form of the First Chechen War, and in particular the Battle of Grozny, where an entire mechanized brigade was lost, totaling 62 tanks and 163 other armored fighting vehicles. Now, while the Battle of Grozny and the First Chechen War in general is largely a screw up because of post Soviet Russia's virtual inability to conduct military affairs effectively, it was also very much proven that the Chechens had completely outclassed Russian heavy vehicles with the use of things like RPGs. This therefore made it again very clear that there was a need for a dedicated anti-personnel fighting vehicle that was very, very effective in urban environments. This became further reinforced during the wars during both the First and Second Chechen Wars, when the Russians began converting self-propelled anti-aircraft platforms, so things like the ZSU-23 to Zhuka or Shaika, I believe it's referred to. They began pushing them into service as anti-infantry platforms and just using them to just blast fortified positions. They were brilliant at suppressing and knocking out fortified positions, but they couldn't press forward themselves as they did not have the armour for that kind of a job. So, following the Chechen conflicts, a further number of designs would have been put forward. The Object 199 was first shown to the public in the year of 2000 and showed off an armament of a single 2A42 30mm gun and four 9M1 33 Cornet launchers. This was to form the subsequent basis for a new design, the design that would become the BMPT Terminator, which entered production in Russia in 2002. This was armed with a pair of the 30mm 2A42 guns, two independent 30mm grenade launchers, and four Ataka 130mm anti-tank guided missiles, which were effectively modernized versions of the Cornet launchers. Those 30mm weapons, by the way, the 2A42, those are the same ones which are found on later versions of Russia attack helicopters. They are very much built for completely ruining your day. The hull which this new weapons platform would be based on would be that of a T-72. It is important to note that there is one significant difference between the BMPT and the BMPT-72, which is that the BMPT itself is built entirely from scratch. The BMP-72 is a retrofit version that uses old hulls from T-72Bs and T-72Ms. We'll go into a little bit of detail about that later. So the hull gives the Terminator a max speed of 60 kilometers an hour over highways, with a maximum range of about 550 kilometers using external fuel tanks. It does carry the seven forward gears and one reverse gear of the T-72, which means it is absolutely cursed by the god-awful reverse speed. This is offset somewhat by the fact that because there is an abundance of spare parts for T-72s, the Terminators from a hull perspective, never have to really worry about a lack of parts, despite being such a specialized vehicle. The Russians have been very, very good in making sure it's based on something that they can nick a lot of spare parts from. It also takes into account other things such as new protection elements for the crew from T-90s, as well as things such as anti-radiation, anti-chemical, and anti-biological protection. So against standard weapons, the hull is protected by third generation ERA Relkick armor. I'm probably saying that wrong, on both the front and the sides of the hull, as well as on the turret. It also has cage armor on the rear. This is something which has become a lot more prevalent due to the impact of drones. The launchers themselves are protected against shrapnel and small arms fire, whilst the weapon station is protected only by small arms fire. The Terminator possesses a System 902A automatic smoke grenade launcher on both sides of the turret, which serves as camouflage and provides protection against guided weapons. When alerted to the threat of laser tracking, the grenade launchers will automatically pop smoke rounds to cover the vehicle. So obviously, the thing that everyone looks at are the twin 30mm 2A42 cannons. These pump out a combined rate of 600 rounds a minute. So if you compare that to the M242 Bushmaster on the Bradley, that can do around 500 rounds a minute when given full power. And the Terminator has two of these. The guns themselves are stabilized. Normal practice amongst Russian forces, it's been stated, is to have one gun loaded with armor-piercing rounds, such as armor-piercing discarding sabot and armor-piercing tracer, whilst the other gun is given high explosive tracer and high explosive frag rounds. This allows it to engage a wider series of targets and doesn't limit it. Of course, in some situations, both guns can be loaded with the same ammunition type. So if you're dealing with an environment where you're less likely to encounter armor, then one gun can just be loaded with, or both guns can be loaded with high explosive frag rounds, which will really mess up an infantryman's day. With weapons holding 850 rounds, sorry, they are very, very effective against combating a wide variety of targets. The final weapon on board is a coaxial mounted 7.62mm PKTM machine gun holding 2,000 rounds. This really is just the sort of thing for when you want to deal with enemy infantry at close range and suppress them. So, when it comes to the reason why this thing has become so popular in recent times is because of the fact that the vehicle's existence in Ukraine. We've known about the thing for a while, but in Ukraine they really came to prominence. According to the Russian media outlet RIA Novosti, the BMPT was first deployed to Ukraine on the 18th of May 2022. These models were seen to be using older AGS-17 grenade launchers, which was used on sort of like the first iteration of them. There were only 10 vehicles actually in Russian service at that time, and they may all have been using that weapon system. They were first observed by Ukrainian forces during the battles for Shivadonetsk, which was fought between May 6th and June 25th, 2022, which has been described as one of the bloodiest battles of the conflict prior to Bakhmut. So footage first appeared in late May when a pair of BMPTs alongside Russian tanks were observed on the high ground, shelling a highway which was being used by the Ukrainians to withdraw from the city. The most common area of footage where these vehicles have been found is in Crimea, in the Crimea forest. This was where an ongoing action has been had for about 2 years along the P66 highway, though by this point I believe the P66 has actually been secured by Russian forces. There's been very little coming out of this position because it's really dense forested areas, really heavily wooded, and it's been known that the BMPTs were working alongside VDV fighters, those are Russian airborne forces, to try and clear the Ukrainians out of the position. So in October of 2022, it was also reported by Alexander Kalemkov that a BMPT had either been destroyed or damaged by Ukrainian forces near Kharkov in the Donetsk Oblast, which has been the scene of intense fighting since October of 2024, since Russia has begun a new offensive. So quickly just flipping ourselves back to the point around the BMPT 72. With Russia suffering as many losses as it has done from its armoured forces, particularly its T-72s, there are a lot of spare hulls lying around. With the BMPT, because sometimes it's well, because the Russians have so many T-72 hulls lying around, they have simply just started retrofitting them. It doesn't take a whole lot. The turrets of the BMPT is designed to fit inside a T-72 hull, so in reality, the idea of doing a quick conversion job doesn't not make sense. And as the Russians, particularly now, this is being recorded in mid-January, and the Russians have had a bit of a breakout in the Donetsk, it is highly likely that at some point soon the Russians will come to a major populated center. And if Bakhmut is anything to go by, where BMPTs were not sighted at all, which is weird considering the fact that's what they were built for, then you could see them being used more in that urban style environment, depending, of course, if Ukraine wants to fight over major population centers, as they did for Bakhmut. So thank you very much, guys, for the holdout on this one. I know I've been dreadful at uploading. Life. We've been house moving, we've been universitying. It's all just lovely, lovely, lovely stuff. So I thank you very much for the patience. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Please like, subscribe, share, and then tell me how absolutely inconsistent I am. I very much appreciate everyone's comments and feedback. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.